welcome to the very first Radda interview. I'm Schodowski, the founder of Radda, and I had the pleasure of interviewing the wonderful pianist Dr. Joanne Polk. Joanne is currently a piano professor at the Manhattan School of Music in New York City and is also an exclusive Steinway artist. She's had a dynamic career both as a performer and a teacher. She dedicates much of her time performing and recording works by female composers such as Amy Beach, Clara Schumann, Fanny Mendelssohn, and most recently, Louise Farrenc. Her CD, Songs of Amy Beach, was nominated for a Grammy Award, and her other CD featuring solo piano works by Cecil Chaminade, The Flatterer, debuted at #1 on the classical Billboard chart. In this interview, Joanne and I discussed her musical career from the very beginning, as well as her teaching style and advice she gives to aspiring musicians. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and be sure to connect with Joanne on RaddaConnect.com for personal feedback on your performances. So what I was figuring, we could just start at the very beginning. I know you started piano at a very young age. So what got you into doing lessons?
I was maybe 2, and I was just climbing up on the piano in the apartment where I was living and started playing everything that I heard. And I think my parents just freaked out and thought they had a big prodigy on their hands. And I was sent to Juilliard when I was 4, but I was a little bit too young, so I had to wait until I was 7. And then I went back when I was 7, and I was at Juilliard from ages of 7 to 12. So I was just, I had perfect pitch, and I just demonstrated an immense amount of talent as a child. And I think that's what launched it. I have a son who is a cellist, I have a son who's a cellist, and his talent came more to the forefront when he was about 6. Mm-hmm. So, but mine sort of like by the age of 2.
Wow. Did you have any family that were musicians, or?
No.
Oh, okay. So they just recognized it right away.
That's awesome. I mean, I had family, we had a piano, and I had family who loved music and all studied music, but there were no musicians. There was a distant relative who was a violist, but no, it was just sort of, an unusual situation. So they immediately sent me to Juilliard.
Wow, that's incredible. So what was your experience like while you were at Juilliard as a kid?
It was overwhelming as a kid. I was too young. It was just a little bit overwhelming as a child. I went back in college where I was a little bit more prepared for it, but I mean, it was exciting and it was stimulating, but I was just swimming. I was tiny, and it was, and I learned a lot, but it was a lot.
Mm-hmm. Was it very competitive as well
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I can't say that I circulated so much because I was so young. And you'd have to check me about this. I'm not positive that this is true, but I don't think they take children that young anymore. I think it's too young.
Yeah.
I don't think they do that anymore. I think it's just too much. And so I would be in school from Monday to Friday, and then I'd spend all day Saturday at Juilliard. So it was a lot. It was a lot of work as a kid.
I bet. So what were your teachers like as you were growing up?
They varied. I think when you've got an immensely talented kid, there's a lot of excitement. And so there was a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of work, and there was a lot of practicing. And one of the biggest challenges I now understand as a parent is, when do your kids get their practicing done, right? Because they're off to school, and then they come home from school and they're tired and they have homework. Mm-hmm. So I had to do my practicing. I had to do an hour before school.
Wow.
At 6:30 in the morning. And then I had to do an hour after school. And so my teachers were excited and pushed me. Some were more gentle, some were more aggressive. I would really have to say that my best teachers, the ones that I feel did the best for me, came in when I was in college.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that then. So you got your bachelor's and master's at Juilliard, and then your doctorate at Manhattan, correct?
Correct.
So what were the most memorable moments you had from your teachers during college then?
I had a teacher in college who taught me that the piano should sound like an orchestra. And so he would be teaching me, and at one point he'd say, that should sound like a flute. And he'd say, play the flute. And I would, and the whole sound of the piano would change. Or, the other thing is that pianists don't have to breathe. And so and everybody else has to breathe, especially wind instruments. And so I had teachers who tried to get me to understand that I should be breathing in my phrases as a pianist. And the idea of an orchestra is a really important one, because one of the most difficult things about a piano is to get a great sound. You know, everybody can plunk the instrument. It's not like, for example, violin or cello, where you have to actually find the note. Anybody can plunk the piano note. But to get a certain kind of sound, I had a teacher once who told me that I needed to caress the keys. Mm-hmm. And again, this came in college. And then I had a teacher who gave me my general philosophy of sound, which is that the sound comes from the back. And that she would say to me, your arms like spaghetti, your fingers like steel. So you have to, your arm basically has to become a water pipe. It has to become a complete pipe, so that all of the energy from your back goes right to your fingertips. Sorry, I don't know how to turn off I can't see it, but I don't know how to turn off my,
no worries,
my email sound. And so, very often when we're nervous, we do this, or even when we're cold, but we're nervous, our shoulders go up, and we're afraid, our shoulders go up, and that takes the sound right out of the piano. And I spend a lot of time with my students trying to get them to relax their shoulders and their arms so that the sound can go right into their fingertips. Mm-hmm. And we will succeed in that in the lessons, and then they'll get up and do a performance, and they'll be scared, and it'll be like this, and so we do it again and we do it again. But that's, those are the kinds of things that I learned as a student. I will say that it was difficult being a girl. It was difficult being a woman pianist, as I think it still is in many ways, because when I started, it was really around the time of competitions really getting going. And it was a bit of a sport, mm-hmm. And you don't put women against men in sports. So it was a little bit like who could make the huger sound and so that, that was a little bit tricky for me. But in general, the philosophies that I got from my teachers really informed how I played the piano. A lot of what I've learned, though, in reference to solving problems at the piano and teaching has come from just doing it. Mm-hmm. From teaching, from performing. How do you solve the problems? How do you solve the technical problems? How do you project your sound? Do you play differently in a small hall than you do in a large hall? These things have come from simply playing a lot of concerts, doing a lot of recordings, and doing a lot of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So what do you think, I guess, so do you approach each of your students the same way, or do you find that you have to adjust quite a bit between all of them?
Yeah, I mean, my teaching philosophy is to take a student from point A to point B with absolutely no investment in where point A is. As long as the student has gotten into Manhattan School of Music as a college student, we have to assume that that person is at a certain level. And then it's a very individual approach. And sometimes I'll come up against a real obstacle, something that happened to them when they were children, a total fear of performing, this kind of thing. And so I work a lot with each person, really just to get them to be the best that they can be. And that's really my philosophy. I just want each student to feel proud and to enjoy what they're doing, and not to feel the horrible pressure of what happens if I miss a note. And so, no, I can't say that I have one standard way of working.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what about your students? Like, what do you look for whenever you're accepting students into your studio?
That's a really great question, I must tell you. I look for personality. To me, that is the most, I can't teach it. There's certain things I can't teach. Yeah. I can teach technique. I can teach you how to solve problems. I can teach you how to practice. I can teach you how to practice in order to solve problems. I can teach you a little bit how to be confident on the stage. And I do that a lot by holding weekly studio classes, literally from the first day of school, to just get up and play and get up and play and get up and play, so that when it's time to do that adjudicated graduation recital, you're really prepared for it. But I can't teach personality. So I look for people who kind of have an unusual bent, an unusual take, an unusual interpretation, and that I feel I can work with best.
Mm-hmm. Do you also judge competitions as well? So do you look at that as well in the competition?
I do look for that as well. I don't see any value in repeating an interpretation that happened 50 years ago. I don't think we should live anybody else's life. So I really want somebody to do something a little bit different. Classical music it's a tough sell because a lot of the same pieces are played. Mm-hmm. And I do look for students who are interested in unusual pieces, unusual composers, living composers, not the named Beethoven sonatas all the time. There's 32 Beethoven sonatas for the piano, but some of them get played more often than others. So I'm looking for I also look for a creative and intellectual mind, somebody who's really curious. So that's basically what I'm looking for. Again, given all the other sort of standard stuff that it's required to get into the school.
Of course. So going into that, with the living composers and whatnot, you're really dedicated to promoting female composers. So what got you started into being really passionate about pursuing that?
I'll tell you exactly what got me started. I went to a concert of a piece and I was touring with a baritone, and we were sort of going around the country, and then we were in New York City, and he said, look, I'm doing a concert at Merkin Concert Hall. He got me a free ticket, and I went and I heard a piece by Judith Langzamont called Arable. And at the end of the piece, there were 4 singers and an orchestra, and the orchestra was playing, and the 4 singers were reciting the Kaddish, which is the Jewish prayer for the dead, over the orchestra. And it was, there's about 5 times in my life where I've actually burst into tears in a concert hall, and that was one of them. I was just so taken by this. And somehow Judith Zamont and I connected, and we met. And she told me she had a piece called a calendar set, which has 1 movement for every month of the year. So there's 12 movements. Mm-hmm. Asked me if I would learn it, asked me if I would record it, which I did. And that began a really long friendship. She lives in Arizona. In December, I was in Arizona, I saw her. And she opened my eyes to the struggles of being a woman composer. And it touched, the whole subject touched me. And I began to do research, and I began to look up music, and I began to discover music, and I began to discover beautiful music that had been recorded really not too well. And I went into a hall. I was a doctoral student at Manhattan School of Music, went into a hall, made a cassette recording of some Clara Schumann songs, sent it off to a record company, and they said yes. And then it just sort of went from there. So I am very interested in bringing to the forefront the struggles of women in the past who had to sort of compose in a closet, as well as today. Today, I really think there's been tremendous progress. And I think that in conservatories now, you're going to see a 50-50 split with men and women being accepted as composers. But my most recent CD, the one of Louise Ferenc, she wrote 30 etudes for piano. She taught at the Paris Conservatory. Those 30 etudes were required of all pianists, and they wouldn't let her teach composition. She couldn't study composition. She couldn't teach, isn't that ridiculous? She could only teach piano. And she wrote the pieces that were required.
That's incredible.
And she wrote a nonet for 9 instruments, and it was premiered by Joachim on the violin, who was a renowned violinist in those days. And it was such a huge success that she used that success to go to the powers that be at the Paris Conservatory and ask for equal pay, because she was being paid half of what her male colleagues were being paid, and she won. She did get that. Mm-hmm. Never got on the composition faculty. So that kind of thing touches me. I want to put her music out there so people can listen.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like I'm a pianist as well. I went to University of North Texas, and I got really involved in the composition department there. And even then, still most of the composers were guys. So
that's right.
Still very present today.
You also see that with conductors. Mm-hmm. And, I just had an interview with Fred Child on Performance Today, and one of the things I just said to Fred was, I would love to get to the point in our lives where we eliminate the adjective. It's just a composer. We don't have to put an adjective. It doesn't have to be woman and a man and this and that. It's just a composer. So that's where I'm hoping we're heading. But for now, I think everybody needs an advocate, and every composer needs an advocate. And I'm going to advocate for those women I also have, I'm playing music by men as well, but I'm interested in just bringing to the forefront music by women that would normally not be brought to the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. So going into what it's like to be a musician today, I know the situation is very crazy with COVID-19, and a lot of musicians have been having to adapt in order to make a living. So what have you seen on your perspective?
Well, I think freelancers are getting hit the hardest.
Hmm.
It's a nightmare for people who depend on freelancing and concerts to make a living because you can't do them anymore. You simply can't. And I don't know when that's going to come back. And that has mainly to do with when we're going to be able to be in a crowd. So that has been a nightmare for people. Those of us who are teaching, especially at universities, we're continuing, and conservatories and colleges, we're continuing to teach. And I think of all in the conservatories, the students who are most affected are people like pianists and harpists because they depend on the schools to have pianos. So very often I'll be giving, I was just telling somebody I had to adjudicate a graduation recital of a woman who is about to give birth, and she had to play on an electric keyboard. So she was playing Chopin and Schumann and Brahms and Beethoven on an electric keyboard, which didn't even have 88 keys.
Oh God.
So it changed everything. For those of us teaching, we are trying to make it work. It's the performing aspect that has been devastating, really devastating, and making people just panic and wonder if it's ever going to be better. And it will be better, but it's going to be a while.
Do you think it's going to cause a big shift in the industry with everything that's going on?
Um, the only shift that I hope that it causes is that when we are living without live music, we long for it more. You know, I think the first live concert we go to is going to be very moving for all of us. It really brings to the forefront what you're doing, because what you're doing is, I mean, works in this environment. This is what's so wonderful about what you're doing. Because that right now, this is all we've got. I mean, thank goodness we have the technology to be able to reach out and not be in the same room. But you know, I just think that it's going to make people more grateful to go to rehearsal because you get to, you know, it's like, another rehearsal. Well, now we get to get to see each other. You know, I'm very curious as to whether or not, you know, it's one thing if you have a chamber group and you have 4 people. What about an orchestra? You know, are we going to be able to sit in that large group? But I've lost a lot of concerts. You know, everything I have is certainly canceled until the fall and maybe beyond. So it's very difficult, especially, as I say, for younger people who are just starting out and they're basically living on gigs. The
Mm.
gigs aren't happening. It's a very challenging time.
So do you have any advice that you would give to musicians on how to be successful in their career, especially given the circumstances right now?
Well, I think the answer to that is 2 different answers. I mean, you know, let's not. I'm going to just get rid of the current circumstance because I do think it's temporary.
Mm.
My feeling, and this is what I say to my students and really anybody who talks to me, is if you want to be a musician, you're going to be a musician. You're going to find a way. If it's the passion is inside of you, you have to have tremendous tenacity. You have to be able to take a ton of rejection, but you have to believe in your own artistry and your own right to be a musician. You are going to be rejected and people are going to shut the door in your face. I think one of the things that got me so excited about Judith Zamont was that the day I met her, she told me she has a philosophy. If you can't walk through, walk around. And I love that image that, you know, if something's standing in your way, find a way around it. And so, you know, if you're interested in being a musician, you have to work extremely hard and you have to have an individual way of saying things. You have to have something that differentiates you from the crowd. And so that, in that way, you find a way, whatever the way is, you go into, you offer your services, you find assisted living facilities, you teach children, you do whatever you can to get out there and make the world a better place because of your music. And in the process of that, you're going to have some kind of career. In reference to today and what people are struggling with today, there are a lot of organizations out there that are helping musicians, particularly freelancers who are losing a lot of money. But I don't think this should be wasted time. You know, I think it's kind of time we're never going to get back in reference to practicing, you know, the ability to learn new repertoire. You know, one of the things that I'm experiencing is because I don't have a concert you know, coming up next week, I'm actually exploring new repertoire, which is a freedom that I rarely have. So find a way to use the time, and this will be over. It doesn't feel like it's ever going to be over, but it is going to be over at some point. And you know, those who use the time, I think will fare better than those who spent the time lamenting the losses. I think I don't mean the health losses. I'm talking about the losses of employment.
Mm.
So I would just say, see if you can use the time to your advantage if it's at all possible. It's tricky. It's hard.
Yeah, for sure.
I know.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
One of the questions that you had sent me there were a couple of questions that you sent me that um, I wanted to talk about a little bit. You asked me some of my personally, one of the exciting moments in my career, and also what's exciting about students, and that's interesting to me. And I wanted to answer that question by saying that when a student plays a wonderful performance, it's completely fulfilling for me to see that also students who arrive very shy and then emerge on the stage is very fulfilling to me. A student who wins a competition, a student who has the courage to enter a competition, whether they win or not, is exciting to me. A student who has the courage to try for the next degree category, goes from bachelor's to master's or even master's to doctorate and gets accepted, is very exciting to me. So just watching a student emerge is, to me, just the greatest joy. And aside from being nominated for a Grammy, I was nominated for a Grammy on a CD of music by a woman. And then I also had another CD come out where it was #1 on classical Billboard. And I don't know why it was, I don't know what happened, but it was music by a woman. So just the idea that 2 CDs got a certain kind of recognition by the public, and the CDs were music by a woman composer, a classical woman composer, I think there may be a shift. And that was extremely exciting for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been really enlightening, and I've loved hearing about your life and all of your successes as a musician. And also, Joanne is a reviewer on Radda as well, so you can reach out to her and get feedback on your performances. So with that concludes our first interview. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Lovely to talk to you. Take care.
You too.
Bye.